Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. I am so happy to welcome you to Reading with Your Kids. We are coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and so very happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can help with that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a really wonderful show for you today. Mike Boldt returns to Reading with Your Kids to celebrate Cantaloupe and Honeydew Ride a Bike. We will also be welcoming Tracy Gold to the studio to celebrate Call Your Mother. Before we invite our guests into the studio, we have an announcement to make. We have a brand new Reading with Your Kids certified great read. It's Just Imagine a More Beautiful World, written by Christine McDonald. This is the delightful and heartwarming children's book that invites young readers to explore the boundless possibilities of their imagination. The story, centered around a classroom activity led by the inspiring Mrs. Burns, encourages creativity, self-discovery, and the power of imagination. The narrative begins with Mrs. Burns asking her students to crawl under their desks and to pretend to be in a cave. She then provides them with cardboard to create their own worlds, placing themselves at the center and building outwards. This exercise sparks the children's creativity as they imagine and construct unique worlds where they feel safe, loved, and free to be themselves. This book also includes an interactive element with Bun Bun, a character who helps readers get started on their own creative journey. Readers are encouraged to draw a heart in the middle of a circle shaped like the earth, and then color it in using any art medium they like. They also are prompted to think of 3 things that bring them joy and can make a more beautiful world, and to express these thoughts through writing, drawing, coloring, singing, or dancing. We really love this book. You're going to love it too. Just Imagine a More Beautiful World, written by Christine McDonald. Join us right now from the beautiful province of Alberta in the lovely nation of Canada. Our guest is here today to celebrate. His brand new picture book is called Cantaloupe and Honeydew Ride a Bike. Please welcome back to the show, Mike Boldt. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well, Jed. Thanks for having me on.
I'm delighted to have you back on. I don't know. There aren't many cantaloupes and honeydews growing in Alberta, are there?
No, not exactly a lot of fruit grown here. Probably a few apples, but that's about it.
I love Canada. It is a beautiful country. The people are beautiful. I haven't made it out west yet, but as I told my beautiful wife, because she thought after our tour of the Maritimes and Quebec and Toronto and the Niagara Falls area, she said, well, we've been everywhere in Canada. And I said, no, we've been everywhere we want to drive to.
Yeah, that's fair. We're a little bit further west than Niagara Falls out here, so. But Banff would be worth seeing someday. Banff and Jasper.
Okay. And there's that train, the Trans-Canada train that's really fancy that I've seen. That seems like it would be a good ride.
Yeah. I think. I mean, I've never done it, but I've heard good things. I mean, and even I've had my in-laws. They've done the train from Edmonton across the Rockies down to Vancouver, and that's beautiful too. So
wonderful. Well, we should tell everybody why Cantaloupe and Honeydew are riding a bike.
Well, they haven't done it before, so I guess they.
Why not?
Yeah. Well, we don't know where Cantaloupe gets the bike from, but Cantaloupe has a bike.
Okay.
And then decides that they can't ride a bike because they fell the first time, right? And meanwhile, Honeydew wants to ride a bike and has never ridden one before, but believes that they can.
Cool. Where did this sounds like one of those dreams that you have, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, I got to write this down, otherwise I won't remember it.
You know what? It's actually pretty close to that. I get ideas from all kinds of things. And I actually have right here, I have this stack of like Post-it notes. And so when I get ideas, I just like write it down. Sometimes I'm doodling and I get an idea. But if I don't have time to address it right away or dedicate some time to it, I don't want to forget it. And Cantaloupe and Honeydew, I mean, it just happened off of one day, just like realizing the wordplay that was in there. And that there's a cant or a can in cantaloupe, and then there's a dew in honeydew. And these two fruits they're always together. Like when you go to the grocery store, they're beside each other all the time. When you get a fruit platter, there's always a cantaloupe section, there's always a honeydew section. Mm-hmm. And the rest can be a mix, but those two seem to be like inseparable. And so I thought maybe there's something to this whole wordplay thing with a cant or a can and a dew. And originally, the cantaloupe was going to be always the cant. But I didn't want him to be just like a negative character. Mm-hmm. And so I had to kind of like work through that, these are going to be two characters who are going to learn how to do new things. And through their, the way that they approach things, one being a little bit more hesitant or cautious, and one being like all in all the time, like feet first, and how they learn how to do these things together. So,
you're mentioning that the cantaloupe and honeydew are always together on the fruit platter in the supermarket. But as you're talking about that, I'm thinking there are a lot of kids with similar, like, opposing personalities who always seem to pair up together.
Sure.
There's those kids that are inseparable, but man, they're so different from each other.
Yeah. And I mean, and even like siblings too, right? Like
right.
You have like siblings or friends and that is kind of like how some of these dynamics seem to work. They'll have similarities. They'll like the same things.
Yep.
but the way that they approach these things are very different. And I really wanted to highlight that, not everyone, but there are times where we look maybe more favorably up on people who are just eager to try everything, just believe that they can do everything. And sometimes the people who have a little bit more caution, or the kids that have a little bit more caution, you try to encourage them, why can't you just go and do these things? And it's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing either to be cautious about things. Those are the kids who like read the instructions first. Those are the kids who kind of check out their boundaries and want to like proceed like safely or whatever it is. Like, it's not a negative thing, like maybe how it can be perceived. And so I wanted to make sure that it's balanced with how we look at all these kids who have these different traits. I mean, I recognize these traits in my own kids. So it's like, it was easier to write them when you kind of like, like this is like my son and this is like my daughter. Uh-huh. And yet, and not completely like them either, right? Like they both have things in life that they will approach cautiously, mm-hmm. and things that they'll approach that they just believe that they can instantly do it. And especially when kids are young, right? So.
Yeah. And as you're mentioning that, it seems a lot of times those personalities will switch. Mm-hmm. You might have, your son might be always the gung-ho, dive right in, and the daughter's a little cautious. But then they get to this other thing, and then suddenly the daughter's like, let's go. And the son's like, wait a minute, let's look at this.
It's kind of what you get confident in doing too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so, I mean, obviously some of it's going to be personality, but there's going to be other things in life. Like when I do author visits, I'll go into a kindergarten class and they'll say, who here likes to draw? Well, they all raise their hands. They all believe they're amazing. And then by the time I'm at like grade 6, I'm like, who here likes to draw? There's like, they all turn around, they'll point at the one kid. Hey, like so-and-so is like the best artist in the class. Uh-huh. And so it's not that they all can't draw anymore, but they start to have a little bit of, I mean, maybe it's not their interest and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But there'll be kids for sure who don't believe they can anymore because they can't do it like so and so. And I like to just tell kids, hey, like, we don't all create the same. We all create differently. And then just like these two melons, like, we're going to approach these things differently based on our age, based on what it is we're trying to learn or whatever. And obviously, yeah.
So I oftentimes will ask an author illustrator what comes first, the images or the text, and obviously the idea came. But did that idea come to you as the fruit in your mind, or was it the plot of the story that came along first?
I wasn't quite sure how to do the artwork, if I'm being honest, because originally I thought, oh yeah, like, I'll paint it or draw it or however it'll be, and that was just kind of it. But then when I wanted to start thumbing out the rough idea for the story and getting familiar with the characters, and I had the idea for the story, I'm like, wait, how is this going to work? Like, that cantaloupe texture is not not easy. Honeydew, yeah, I could probably manage that. But I really wanted them to be identifiable. When you looked at it, that's a honeydew right away, and that's a cantaloupe right away. And so I thought of using the photographs later and then drawing the expressions and the faces and the arms and legs and stuff on them after. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good fit. It's not really something I've done a lot of, but it worked out. It worked out well, and it definitely came after some experimentation.
Do you find that exciting for you when you're trying something new and you're not quite sure if it's going to work?
Oh, I do. I mean, there's comfort in doing what you always know, like kind of more the painted look of what I normally do. But so it kind of has like twofold. Like, if you are starting to find success and you can see the vision coming together, it's super exciting. But if you're kind of like fighting with it for a while, then it's easier to revert to kind of what you're more comfortable with again. Because you're like, okay, like, I had something planned. I'm not able to express, or I'm not meeting my own level of how I want it to work. So I'll just revert a little bit. I'm glad this kind of worked out. I had some other versions of how it looked too. Like, I had a lot of different versions, to be honest, but some of them were okay. But how it ended up in the end was way better than some of those first ones that I was already thrilled with.
Isn't that great when you create something and it's like, wow, I'm delighted that this turned out like this.
Yeah. This series is especially like, because there's going to be more than one of them, which I'm pretty excited about. And so I wasn't too sure at first that you come up with these characters, and I was just like, oh, it's Cantaloupe and Honeydew. And then I'm like, wait, like, it can be them learning this, it can be them learning this. And then your imagination starts to really just like head out. It's like, oh, there's a lot of possibilities of what I can do with this. And you have to rein it in a little bit, because you still have to focus down to, hey, I need one good story first before I do anything else. I really have to nail this. This idea has to be like the best one. And then you can kind of try to branch off from there if there's potential and see if it's real or not. Because some of the ideas of that came from these books were actually from another book I had that didn't get further books in the series that was also kind of about learning things. And so I just like kind of like repurposed them. I'm like, oh, and what's funny is in the end, these stories fit way better with a Cantaloupe and a Honeydew than the original characters that I had thought they would.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you, I've learned a lot about publishing and the process of creating kids' books. The one thing I haven't spoken to anybody about is, how do you pitch this to your agent, and then they pitch it to the publisher? But what's that for you? Do you have a regular meeting with your agent, or do you call them up and say, hey, I have this great idea, and I want to pitch it to you, and you can tell me what you think?
Yeah, I have a really great relationship with my agent. Her name's Jennifer Rofe, and she's amazing. And so that's how it's more the second, where we don't have like a regular schedule thing because these ideas don't come regularly scheduled for me. They are very like maybe one or two a year, right? Where it's like, hey, I got this really great idea. I mean, I have a few others throughout the year, but I've learned I need to like also value her time. I can't just barrage her with ideas that haven't been like a little bit curated a bit by myself. Then she's like, she'll help me evaluate them and work through some of the ideas before she puts together, or she gets me to put some more work into it, maybe write the story, maybe create a few final pieces of artwork, and then she puts a pitch together to bring to editors and different publishers.
Yeah. And in that process, were you first talking and pitching the idea to her? Do you have some sketches so she can picture how in the world is a cantaloupe going to ride a bike? It's a ball. It kind of.
Yeah. So it's like, I almost do a pre-pitch before what it looks different than what
Sure.
we send out to the publishers generally. And so she has a really great eye knowing, like, obviously, hey, publishers like this kind of thing, publishers like this has some legs, but we need to like address this issue, address that issue. Maybe the artwork is so, and then we'll go out with it. And originally this idea actually got turned down a few times. We had a different vision for it, more of like an early reader series. And I had it quite a bit more subdued as far as like the energy level. And then when my current publisher finally, they all of a sudden, they were really interested in it when I kind of brought it. They had a suggestion, hey, could we kind of like this? We have this different vision for it. What do you think? With a little bit more energy. And as soon as they gave me that, I'm like, oh, this could be a lot of fun now. Like, cause I'm kind of stepping back into like a picture book, which is what I'm more familiar with rather than like the early readers. Mm-hmm. And so, it was like kind of got unleashed a little bit of what you can do. And yeah, it kind of snowballed from there into what we have today.
You know, as someone who made a living doing educational magic shows and coming up with stories to tell through magic, I can relate to that excitement that you felt like we get that permission, like we like this, but can you add a little bit? You want more? Yes, yeah. I can do that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, and I think creatively, I work really well with other people who have those ideas to contribute to yours, and I can see where they fit in and how they're going to build up. And I think in publishing, what I've really learned is like, this isn't like an individual thing where it's like, for me, I'm not just a creator who creates something, hands it in, and they package it up and send it out. I think almost every time I've been working with an editor, like they've brought back things that have been like instrumental in improving the story from my first pitch, and especially from my very first. So it starts with myself and then my agent Jen, and then the editor and the art director, and obviously there's other people involved along the process too. And for the most part, like these stories that I've worked on have always gotten better through that process, and it's a really valuable process that I take a lot of value in that, knowing and recognizing that too.
And was that hard for you to adjust? Because I think a lot of people would think, oh, an artist, an illustrator, a writer, it's a solitary kind of thing. They're in their studio by themselves and they're just geniuses, but don't mess with them. Don't tell them what to do, because they'll get really upset, and they're that this is my baby. I don't want to change it.
Well, I think when I was like really young and I was illustrating for other people originally, like kind of freelance outside of publishing, I think I had a bit of that attitude, and I think there's still creatives out there. Like none of us love changes because you feel like it's like a challenge a little bit, right? Or maybe it's a bit, and learning how to take critique is something you have to learn how to do. Mm-hmm. And you realize like it's not a personal attack, right? Like critique is there someone's identifying probably a problem, right, and they might not have the solution, but that's where the challenge is for us to come up with the solution for this. Yeah. And they might have some suggestions, and maybe you can take that path and make it work with what you've done before. And other times you're going to have to be like, okay, I know there's a destination and right now I'm not getting there. And so how do we revise what we have to get to that place so that so-and-so is going to also be happy with how this is turning out too, right? So
I'm probably not as good at taking suggestions. It drives me crazy when somebody says, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Okay, what don't you like about it? I don't know, but I just don't like it.
Right.
What can I make it do better? I have no idea. I just don't want that. So it's like,
yeah. There's a difference between just like constructive criticism and like something that you can use, right?
Yeah.
And just criticism for the sake of criticizing something is like, that's not always very helpful.
Right.
You're right.
Yeah.
And that's the part where it's like, yeah, there can be frustrating elements, but I haven't had a lot of editors or people who I've worked with who've had that attitude towards what we're trying to do. Like, they believed in the project enough to begin with that they wanted to move forward with it. And so they see something there, and it's up to me to try to see if our visions can kind of like meet and come together and work out those problems and solve those situations that need solving.
Yeah. With this idea of critique in mind and being able to take suggestions and make changes and work collaboratively, I'm curious if you have some suggestions for parents of a aspiring creative. You know, one of the things that my daughter is really, she came to me and I just said, yeah, that's great. Pretty soon she wouldn't ask me anymore because it's just like, you're not being honest with me. I want some input. So how can we truly support our kids who are aspiring to be an artist, an illustrator?
Yeah, as a parent, it's hard, right? Because it's like you don't want to discourage them. And kids are obviously individuals. They're all going to receive, if they're looking for criticism and they get it, they might not want to do it anymore, right? And I think part of it is life and figuring it out in the greater world. And I think as parents, we're kind of there to help them get to that place. Generally it's through like support. And how does that support look? Whether it's getting them the tools, the mediums, the supplies that they require, helping them with the research, if they're looking to go to like different schools or what have you, or all these different things, or when they're younger, classes, right? The people who have the skill set to help them, to challenge them with that proper critique and proper education and stuff along the way. I mean, my own parents, they weren't super artistic. My mom was fairly artistic, but they were just encouraging, right? They're just like, hey, like if this is something you want to do, we're not going to tell you you're not going to do it, or that it's the bad idea. Even though now when my kids express like, hey, maybe I can like write books or do pictures or get into the arts in some way or the other, and I'm kind of like, ooh, like this is hard, but I can't not encourage them that, hey, if this is something you really want to do, it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to be hard, but that's normal. Like, this is a part of the process. It's not an easy thing. It's enjoyable, but it's difficult at the same time. And I think the one thing I encourage kids with the most is when they hear practice makes perfect, I'd say that that's not true. Practice doesn't make perfect. The people who are at the very top of their game, whether it's sports or athletics or music or anything, they practice the most, right? They're the people who are practicing to make progress. And I think we all have potential, and to get that potential out, we have to practice. And so I always teach the kids when I visit the schools that practice makes progress, or progress, however you pronounce it. And so, and I think that way too, then you're less disappointed with what you do. It doesn't mean you can't be disappointed with it, but you're not measuring against something that's not attainable. You're not measuring against something that everyone else does. You're measuring against what you've done before.
Right.
And I think it's a healthier place to approach some of these creative things, because as a kid, like, that's where those kids in grade 6 are like, well, I can't do it because so-and-so is the artist. They're the ones who can draw. But when you go in a library, all the books look different.
Right.
All the artwork in a museum, the art's all done by different painters. And it all looks unique because we all create in a unique way. And so it's a matter of trying to find their voices and help them through that process, because you want them to create how they're most comfortable creating and using the education, the influences, and all those other things along the way.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And, you know, if your kid is really discouraged, you can take them to a modern art museum and point at the picture that's just blue and say, see, you can do that.
Yeah. Well, and there's whether there's like kids who have become authors, and art's subjective. Like everyone appreciates something else too. So some people are going to find deep meaning in those simple modern art pieces that we maybe perceive that they're simply done, but there's a reason behind it, right? And so it's like, what was the message here? And then that gives you something to think about. Oh, I don't just create to produce something that looks a certain way. Maybe there's something here that's supposed to inspire a thought or something else. So yeah, I mean, even like that whole practice makes progress. That was like a bit of the theme of these Cantaloupe and Honeydew things, right? Like they're going to learn how to do things. And what I wanted in them is when they learn it in the end, it's not going to be perfect. Right. It's going to have errors. Like in the end, Cantaloupe still falls again, right? In this book. And so it's like, oh, but that's okay. Yeah. This is a progress. This is a process. And you can still, and that's still considered doing it or learning how to do it properly. Right. Yeah. So absolutely. And that's what I hope that people find from a lot of the things that I do, that there's something like that in there.
Yeah. Perfect. That's really good advice. I remember at the end of one of my shows, a student raised their hand and said, have you ever made a mistake on stage in one of your shows? And I said, I haven't had a show where I didn't make a mistake.
Right.
Did you notice the one that I made today? No? Then it's a success.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Yeah. And it's so true, right? Like there's kids too, like, especially the young ones. I'll go there and they're like, how did you make all these books the same? I'm like, well, I don't paint every single page in every single book. I don't have that skill set to duplicate these things like this. But they don't know that at that young age. And their perception of the world is that I can. Right. And so I like to make sure that I smash that it's a machine that does it. I could never do that.
I would never want to do that.
Yeah, and then they're like, oh, and how do you get the hardcover? I'm like, well, it's a board. It's not just like a cardboard box that I cut a square out of that's corrugated, right? Like they want to learn. And so the more that we can educate them on these things in this process, I think it helps them to be like, oh, okay, like this is okay. Yeah. And especially when I tell them I've been drawing for longer than most of them have been alive, then and they're like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, and going back to magic, you're taking the magic out of it. And I think that's really, really helpful. Even with me, when kids say, where'd you get your magical powers? I'm very quick to say, I don't have any. I learned this from a book. I practice this. And I think a lot of kids, they look at something and they go, wow, I don't know how that's made. I could never do that.
I love that. Even those shows, like how it's made, like they have those, right? Right. And that was stuff that always fascinated me. It's like learning the little bit behind the scenes, understanding the process. I used to love watching, and I still have like books on my shelf that are the art of Aladdin, like some of the animations I loved as a kid. I would buy or even Star Wars, and you see the props that they use and how they built them all. And I loved that, especially when I was younger and learning, like the animation starts off with like a single illustration, like especially the classical stuff, right? And what all goes into it and all the designs they had to choose from and so on. So I think that helped me in my process, learning how to, books are very similar to this whole animation process. It's just now one person can kind of do the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of like transitioned from animation to books, because I love that whole process. And I still work with a team once in a while if there's another author that I'm working with, and obviously the rest of the publishing team, but it's not like animation with hundreds and hundreds of people.
Right. Wow, this has been fascinating. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Cantaloupe and Honeydew Ride a Bike and find out more about all the great things coming from your imagination.
MikeBoldt.ca, that's my website. And I'll have all the books and all the things that I do on there. And I think any bookstore should have access to these Cantaloupe and Honeydew books, and they come out maybe by the time this podcast is out next week. Hopefully there's people out there able to find and enjoy these books soon.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Cantaloupe and Honeydew Ride a Bike. Our guest has been Mike Boldt. Mike, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for your time today, Jed.
Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Hey there, families! Are you looking for an exciting way to bond and learn together? Look no further than our STEM is Family Fun video series. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of STEM through hands-on activities right in your own home. Our series features lessons from experts at renowned institutions like the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, the National Children's Museum in Washington, D.C., and Children's Museum Houston. From making homemade rainbow bridges to creating an oboe out of a straw, there's something for everyone in the family to enjoy. So grab your lab coats and get ready for an adventure. Go to readingwithyourkids.com and click on the STEM is Family Fun link at the top of the page and let the learning and laughter begin. STEM is Family Fun, where learning and bonding go hand in hand. Join us right now from a horse ranch somewhere in the wonderful state of Maryland. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new children's book. It's called Call Your Mother, or as we might say here in Boston, Call Your Mother. Please welcome back to the show, Tracy Gold. Hey, Tracy, how are you?
I am great. Thanks so much for having me.
Delighted to have you back on. Tracy was telling me before we started that she is getting her daughter's pony ready for some kind of horse show on the weekend?
It's a borrowed pony. We're very lucky we get to borrow ponies. And yeah, she's going to do a lead line horse show where she just gets to walk and trot, and I lead her around on the pony. And these poor ponies, once they get old, they don't shed. So I clipped their winter coats off just in time for it to be 90 degrees here in Baltimore. So that's, and I'm at the barn doing a remote podcast call.
That's, the things we do for our kids, I had no idea that I would fall in love with dance and learn dance terms like reveille and the ones that I forget right now. But I did because my daughter just loved dancing and was a big part of that world for 16 years. And the same with my son when he was playing football. And I actually miss it. I think it's wonderful to help your kids do those things.
Yeah, so I grew up riding. This is my fault that she's into this, but she seems to love it, and it's really funny because I think my mom really I got her into horses, and she really loves it. And I think she missed coming with me to the barn all the time. So now she comes out with my kid, and we have 3 generations of us on the horse farm. And I think it's been really special for not just me, but also my mom, that my daughter's into this hobby.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm such a big fan of intergenerational friendships where kids get to spend time, a lot of quality time with their grandparents and their older relatives.
Yes.
And I think kids can learn so much from those relationships. And, of course, I'm sure your mom just is over the moon.
She is thrilled. And, it's perfect. My book, Call Your Mother, really celebrates that grandma, even great-grandma relationship that goes down through the generations. And one of the wonderful things that I appreciate, that I don't think my daughter appreciates it yet, but I appreciate about horse barns, is that I have friends who ride who are 80, and I have friends who ride who are 12. So it's just this wonderful community where, the book is Call Your Mother, right? But there are so many, we call them barn aunties. There's so many mother figures, and it's a wonderful community. I appreciate it so much.
That's super. So tell us about Call Your Mother.
Yeah, so it is a book about all the times you need to call your mom, from when you are a baby to when you become a mother yourself. Should I spoil the ending? I think I should spoil the ending. What do you think?
Go right ahead.
It's very short, but.
Yeah.
So at the end, the baby from the beginning of the book becomes a mother herself, and she calls her mom, and she said something like, "Mom, I don't know how you did it." And her mom says, "Well, I would do the same thing you just did. I would call my mother too." And then there's a picture of the great-grandma in the background of the illustration that Vivian Meinecker did, and it's just beautiful. And, that's the point when, in the story times I do for this book, some of the moms start crying in the story time because, my grandmothers are no longer with us. Mm-hmm. And it just, reminds me that the love that my parents showed for me comes directly from the love that their parents and grandparents had for them. So it's just a wonderful, I feel very lucky that I've had such a wonderful family, and that I'm able to celebrate that with this book and pass it on to my daughter.
There are lots of families that are lots of people who don't have what you have, which is this beautiful family and connection.
Yeah.
How do you think a mom can reverse that and start a new legacy of caring with her kid?
Yeah, it's interesting when I've been out and about at events with this book. Some people are like, "Well, I don't have a good relationship with my mom." And I say, well, then, first of all, the book might not be for everybody. Some of these relationships are incredibly painful for people, and, therapy, right? Mm-hmm. How do you break that cycle? Part of the answer of that is therapy. But what I say to some people who, especially my friends who want the book, and they're like, "Well, I just don't know that I'm going to be able to cope with it because I don't have that kind of relationship with my mom." What I end up saying is, think about when your kids are older, and I know what a wonderful mother and person you are, and I know that they're going to want to call you. Mm-hmm. And, I think that comes from my friends who have been in that position. I think that comes from really just a lot of hard work, healing those wounds, whether it was a bad relationship with a mother or a mother who passed away. Just reading the reviews for this book, there are so many people who reviewed it who said, I wish I could still call my mom. And every time I read this, I'm probably going to hang up on this podcast and call my mom as soon as we're done. It's just, it reminds me to be grateful and appreciate what you do have in your life. Mm-hmm. And those mother figures, those people who, maybe it's your grandma, maybe it's your aunt, maybe it's a teacher. Mm-hmm. there are a lot of wonderful women out there who step in and become mother figures for people who need that in their lives.
Yeah. I think that would be a great conversation to have with your kids as you're reading this book. Obviously, if you're a mom, you snuggled up with your son or your daughter, just kind of celebrate the relationship you have with them. But maybe even having a conversation and say, who are the other women in your life that you can count on? Who are some of the men that you can count on?
Right. Now, Call Your Father is coming out in 2026. So, men, I got one for you, too. I don't know how to approach a non-gender binary version of this book, but when I do story times with it, I tell the children, especially when I'm at a school and I don't know the family situations of all of the kids, I always make sure to say, when I read this book, I want you to think of a grown-up in your life that you love. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't have to be a mom, a dad. People have all kinds of different, especially doing school visits in Baltimore City. There's kids in foster care, all kinds of situations that people have in their lives.
Yeah. You just reminded me of a show that I did in Maine many, many years ago. And in my show, I think I've talked about this before. I used to hand out little beads to kids and ask them to think about something that they're thankful for, and I'm going to collect them, and we're going to do something magical with them. And in this one particular school in Maine, I asked a kid what he was grateful for, and he said, Jedley, you don't know me, and no one else knows me. I'm new at this school, but I'm really thankful for my dads because they just adopted me, and now for the first time in my life, I have a family.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It was pretty special.
It is such a special moment when you get to hear things like that. Yeah.
Tell me, what was it that inspired Call Your Mother to come to life?
So it's kind of funny because when I became a mother, I think a lot of new parents can relate to this. They're like, oh, wow, this is how my parents felt about me. And I never really knew that before. I mean, my family is not super like mushy gushy, huggy, I love you all the time. We don't do that. Mm-hmm. And when I had my baby, I was like, oh my gosh, I am super mushy gushy. This is how my mom felt about me. And I'm sure that as my kid gets older, she'll be like, Mom, I don't want to hug you. Which is why we're not mushy gushy in my family, because I went through that phase. It's like, stop it, Mom. And that's going to break my heart when it happens. But it was just this huge revelation for me. So I started toying around with an idea of just how your relationship with your mom changes when you become a parent. And at the time I wrote this draft, and the refrain was, what would mommy do? And I kind of showed it to a few people. It just wasn't working, so I put it aside. And then I was talking to Christopher, who is the head of Familius, the publisher of Call Your Mother, and he mentioned that they were looking for Mother's Day books. And I sat down and I wrote this book about, how your relationship changes when you become a mother. And instead of the refrain, what would mommy do? I had completely forgotten all about that. I wrote, Call Your Mother. And that worked. And I was like, why does this book sound so familiar? And I looked up it was on my iPhone notes, like Mother's Day book. And I found this old draft. I was like, oh, I already wrote this book when my kid was a baby, and it took me 4 years to figure out a better way to write it.
Wow.
So, sure enough, it was the same book, and it just took me years to figure it out. And the actual phrase, Call Your Mother, came from my father's dad, actually. Uh-huh. Because Grandpa Bill would always call his son Carl and say, Carl, call your mother. And my dad would call his mother, and she would say, Carl, why don't you ever call me? And he'd be like, I'm talking on the phone with you right now. I'm calling you. So Call Your Mother has been kind of like a long-standing family joke for us, as I think it is with many families. But this book is about, mostly wanting to call your mother and not having to be nagged to call her. He did call her. He called her all the time, but it was never enough. She just loved him so much, it was never enough.
Tracy, can I tell you a secret? Don't tell anybody this, okay?
We are on a podcast.
I did this with my son. My wife, he forgot to call on Thanksgiving, and my wife was really angry with him. And I said, you can call him. No, I'm the mother. He has to call me. So I called my son. I said, hey, Mom would love to talk to you, and just happy like that. And so he said, okay, I'll call her. And and he walked into a buzzsaw.
Was she mad? Did she give him a why don't you
she
me?
Absolutely did.
You gotta tell her the secret is once they call you, only positive reinforcement, right?
That's it became positive. It became positive.
That's so funny. I've done that before. I do it with my husband, like, hey, you remember it's your mom's birthday? And with my brother. And then sometimes they do it to me too,
Well, it is. We do take a lot of the wonderful things in our life for granted, and I think Call Your Mother would be a great way to teach our kids not to do that, to be always mindful and thankful for what we have, especially the people that we have in our lives.
Yeah.
Tell me, I love the fact that this book was already written and you'd forgotten about it. How many stories have you written that are just out there waiting to find a home?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I could probably dozens at least. Dozens.
It's a good reminder for folks that are listening who are aspiring authors to sit down and write those stories and save them, even if you don't think they'll ever see the light of day.
Yeah. I also work as a freelance editor, and I was doing that before I ever published picture books, mostly working on novels and nonfiction, but recently I've been doing a lot of picture books. And I find that a lot of people come to me and they're like, I have written one book. It is the book. It is deeply personal to them. And have you ever had Kate Messner, the author Kate Messner, on your show?
I believe I have.
Yeah, so she's got this blog post that I send to all of them, and it's called Picture Book Math. And she's the same way. She writes hundreds of picture books, or she does hundreds of ideas. They might turn into dozens of books, and then only a couple of those books end up getting published every year. So, and she's like award-winning, top of the list for picture book authors. So I always send them that, and I'm like, you know what? Like, I will help you make this book awesome, but this is a tough market.
Yeah.
And even if you have a wonderful book, you might not find a publisher for it. So you got to keep writing and keep finding different angles until you find the right publisher for your book.
Yeah. You mentioned that Christopher Robin, the president of Familius Publishing, came to you saying, we're looking for a Mother's Day book. I think one of the things that we forget in the arts, we think of the arts as this thing that's, it's like, oh, it's pure and it's wonderful and it's just filled with creativity, and it is, but it's also a business.
It's not.
It's also a business, and sometimes for kids, one of the hardest things for a lot of kids to accept is, I'm a great actor, I'm a great singer, and I want that role. And why did this person over here get the role and I didn't? It might be because they were looking for somebody with brown eyes, and you happen to have blue eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Or, I just got a rejection from a publisher on a book because they already had something too similar coming out, and it's not, it was like a pretty niche book. So, that happens too.
Yeah.
It is a business, and the more that I am in this business, the more that I realize that a lot of the picture books that get published have reasons that they would be bought and given as gifts.
Yeah.
So, like my Halloween book that I mentioned, Trick or Treat, Bugs to Eat, about bats on Halloween. That's a cute gift for a kid around Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Not that, please, let's not have our culture have to have Halloween gifts on top of all of the other gifts. But, you know, grandparents love to buy their kids books that they can read. People like to buy it, so they have themed reads for the library and for the classroom. Hide and Seek Nuts to Eat, my next one, it's a fall-themed book. So, again, people stocking up their classrooms and libraries to talk about the change in the seasons. Really all of my books that I've had come out have this clear reason why they would be bought. They're not just, like, cute, sweet stories.
Mm-hmm.
And cute, sweet stories with no, like, reason do end up getting published, but they can be harder.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, going back to this, you know, the business of books, when you write a holiday themed book, you can sell it year after year after year.
Yeah. Yeah. And then forget about it for the rest of the year, which is actually kind of nice.
Yeah. So I'm imagining that some of those aspiring authors who are listening to us would be interested in maybe talking to you about working with you as an editor. And I know other folks are just really interested in learning more about you and your books. So where should folks go?
TracyCGold.com. And I have a blog post on there called I Wrote a Picture Book, Now What? I have a blog post about picture book queries. I've got a lot of good stuff for new writers.
And Call Your Mother is available on your website and at all the usual places?
Yes, all the usual places. And I've got links to all of my books also on my website.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of Call Your Mother. Our guest has been Tracy C. Gold. Tracy, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, we would love for you to connect with us on social media, Facebook.com/ReadingWithYourKids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/ReadingWithYourKids. That's where you can find all of our Drawing With Your Kids and STEM is Family Fun videos. We would also love it if you could visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. One of the things that you can find on readingwithyourkids.com is our Certified Great Read Wall of Fame and all of our complete reviews. You heard earlier in the show that Just Imagine a More Beautiful World by Christine McDonald is our latest Reading With Your Kids Certified Great Read. You can read our full review at readingwithyourkids.com. Hey, you can also use the contact button up at the top of the main page to send us a message. Let us know what you love about the show. Let us know what we could be doing better, and let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the show. And if you're an author, readingwithyourkids.com is the place to go to find out how you can be a guest here on the show and tell thousands of Kidlit fans all over the world about your fantastic children's book. And if you want to support the show, we would love it if you could leave us a review on whatever podcasting app you listen to the show on. 5-star review would be fantastic. Letting folks know what you love about Reading With Your Kids will really help us out a lot. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. We want to start by thanking our guests, Mike Boldt and Tracy C. Gold. I want to thank my amazing team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Judy Hu, Stella Cheray, Hannah Bosange, Alyssa Montiero, Julia Lipman, Devin Hill, Riley Oluhu. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.